You are about to watch a man take his last steps on Earth, and what he says in the final 5 seconds before the screen goes dark has haunted investigators for over 3 years. I need you to pay very close attention to his exact words, because what the police heard and what his family believes he actually meant are two completely different things. By the end of this video, you will understand why they never found a body and why everyone is afraid of that stretch of highway. This story starts on an unusually warm night in late October just outside of Tucson, Arizona. 19-year-old Daniel Robinson had just finished his shift as a field geologist. If you are picturing a quiet, reserved scientist type, delete that image. Daniel was a former college athlete, the kind of guy who could light up a room the second he walked into it. He was articulate, clean-cut, and deeply religious. His father, David, who is going to be a central figure in this nightmare, describes his son as a man with a plan. Daniel had just moved to the desert for his dream job. He had a brand new apartment that he hadn't even finished unpacking, and he was driving a freshly bought, sleek, dark blue 2017 Jeep Renegade. This Jeep is not just a detail, it is a character in this story. In fact, you need to watch it. Watch what that Jeep does. Because on October 23rd, the movement of that vehicle stops making any logical sense. Daniel met up with a friend that afternoon. He seemed totally fine. They laughed, they talked, they hung out. But here is the first crack in the perfect picture. Sometime later, Daniel went to a brewery by himself, which was a little out of character, but nothing alarming. He had one drink, but then he headed to a gas station, and suddenly, his behavior takes a sharp left turn. The security footage from that gas station captures the last known images of Daniel Robinson alive outside of his vehicle. He walks into the store, leaves a small bag of clothes on the counter, and tells the clerk, "Someone is going to come pick these up." He then steps outside, looks down at his phone, and starts texting. These texts go to a woman he had recently met. According to his father, Daniel had expressed some frustration that his romantic feelings weren't being fully reciprocated, but it wasn't a screaming fight. It was the quiet, internal weight of rejection. But whatever he typed on that phone screen, it rattled him. He looks up, jumps back into the Jeep, and speeds off into the desert twilight. This is where the random driving begins. This is where the timeline starts to rot. If you look at the GPS and the pings from his cell phone, it looks like a child scribbled all over a map. Daniel didn't just drive around the block. He drove miles and miles into the open desert, looping around, backtracking, hitting dead ends. It is erratic. It is rapid. It is as if he is looking for something or running from something inside his own head. He calls his family. He tells them he loves them. The tone was off. It wasn't a normal check-in. It was a farewell. Alarms start ringing in the Robinson household immediately. A missing person report gets filed, and a frantic search begins, led by a man who refused to sleep, his father, David Robinson. As the family scrambles to track Daniel's path, a rancher makes a discovery that instantly takes this from a missing person case to a horror movie. 1 month later, the Jeep is found. It's not parked on a road. It's not pulled over. It is sitting in the bottom of a ravine, 20 feet deep in thick brush, nearly impossible to see from the air. The desert had swallowed it whole. The vehicle is a mangled wreck. The airbags have exploded with such force that the interior looks like a war zone. The windshield is shattered. But Daniel is not inside. There is not a single drop of blood. His wallet, his keys, and his cell phone are all gone. It looks like he walked away. But how? How do you walk away from a crash that's severe without leaving a single footprint? The dirt should have told the story, but it was silent. And this is where the skepticism sets in. The police look at the evidence, the weird text messages, the wandering drive, and the crash, and they close the folder in their minds. They label this a mental health crisis. They say Daniel was confused, crashed his car, and wandered off into the heat to die. Case closed. Done. But David Robinson is not buying it. He grabs the crash data recorder, the black box inside the mangled Jeep. He downloads the speed logs, the braking patterns, and the engine status. He then hires an independent accident reconstruction expert to read the tea leaves of twisted metal. And the revelation they find inside that wreckage changes everything. Let me tell you exactly what the expert, a man who has pieced together thousands of crashes for court cases, discovered. When the accident reconstructionist plugged into that renegade, he saw that Daniel had been driving erratically, but right before impact, there was an unexpected surge. The final moments show the car accelerating to a specific speed and then smashing an undercarriage so hard on the terrain that the airbag deployment makes sense, but the physics of the driver's body do not. Here is the deeply unsettling part. The expert proved that a seatbelt was buckled during the crash. The expert proved the airbag deployed violently into the chest of the driver, but the driver's seat is adjusted way too close to the steering wheel for a man of Daniel's size. You see, Daniel is 6'2", long legs, an athlete's frame. He always kept his seat pushed way back. But when they found that wreckage, the seat was pushed all the way forward, jammed close to the pedals, as if someone much shorter had been driving the vehicle. That is not a minor anomaly. That is a catastrophic contradiction. The biomechanics make no sense. Daniel Robinson could not have possibly driven that Jeep off the road with the seat in that position. His knees would have been pinned against the dashboard. He wouldn't have done it. So, if Daniel didn't park his seat there, who did? And if Daniel wasn't driving that Jeep in its final seconds, whose voice are we about to hear? We are finally at the body cam footage. This is the moment of impact. Buccle County Sheriff's deputies have arrived at the crash site in the middle of nowhere. One deputy activates his camera. He is walking through the dry brush, breath heavy, looking at the crumpled metal beast. The audio is hot. The Arizona wind is whipping. And then, the deputy freezes. He hears a voice. It's faint, but it's clear. It's coming from the wreck. The deputy shouts, "Sheriff's office! Come on out!" There is a pause, a rustle, and then a man's voice responds. Not screaming in pain, not crying for help, but calm. Too calm. It says exactly 5 words. "I'm in the passenger seat." The deputy tenses up. He circles the vehicle. He looks through the broken glass. The passenger seat is empty. The back seat is empty. There is nobody there. And then, silence. Just the wind. The deputy checks again. Nothing. The voice is gone. You might be sitting there thinking, wait, that's the hook? What do you mean, a ghost in the passenger seat? Was it a recording? Was it a delayed reaction from an injury? This is where part 2 turns into an absolute spiral. Because David Robinson heard that audio and immediately realized the department had misinterpreted the entire scene. In part 2, I am breaking down the one specific word that reveals Daniel was not alone, and I'm going to show you the maps that connect this crash site to another mysterious disappearance just 3 miles away. The police say they searched the desert, but we found the holes in the search grid. Subscribe now, because this story is not a mental health check. It is a cat and mouse game, and the good guys haven't caught the mouse yet. Let me know in the comments what you think that voice actually said, because his family swears the official transcript is dead wrong. I will see you in part 2. We left off at the moment the body camera captured a voice from a wreck that should have been empty. The deputy standing there in the blazing Arizona sun heard a man calmly say, "I'm in the passenger seat." He looked. He circled the twisted metal skeleton of that Jeep Renegade 3 times. Nothing. No blood trail leading away, no footprints, no Daniel. Just a seat pushed impossibly close to the steering wheel, and a silence that felt heavier than the heat. Now you have to understand something about David Robinson. He is a man who has been failed by every system designed to protect his son, but he is not the type of father who sits at home and waits for a phone call. He flew to Arizona, rented a truck, and turned himself into a detective, a search and rescue operative, and frankly, a very dangerous problem for the people who wanted this case to go away. When he got his hands on that body cam audio, he didn't just listen to it once. He put on headphones, locked himself in a quiet room, and played it back 50 times, 100 times, scrubbing through the static, isolating the syllables. The official transcript from the sheriff's office said the voice claimed, "I'm in the passenger seat." Case closed, mental break. He was hallucinating or a trick of the wind. But David Robinson slowed the audio down to half speed. He filtered out the wind noise, boosted the gain on the vocal frequency, And when he played it for me, for the media, for anyone who would listen, the hair on my arms stood straight up. He didn't hear, "I'm in the passenger seat." He heard his son say, "I'm in the back seat." Think about the difference that single word makes. Passenger seat is bizarre, confusing, almost ghostly. Back seat is a cry for help. If Daniel was injured, dazed, crawling through the vehicle after impact, his logical instinct would be to push backward, away from the deployed airbag, away from the smoke. But he was a big man, 6'2", trapped in a compact SUV, with the front seat jammed all the way forward. The only space available to him would have been the back. He was telling the deputy exactly where he was, and the deputy didn't check carefully enough. David believes with every fiber of his being that his son was alive inside that vehicle when law enforcement arrived. He believes Daniel was slipping in and out of consciousness, heard the voice of a rescuer, and used his last strength to whisper his location. And then, the deputy walked away. The official search didn't start for hours. By the time they returned to the scene, the desert had erased everything. That is not a theory designed to make friends in the sheriff's department. That is a direct accusation of fatal negligence, and it has turned this missing person case into an open war between a grieving father and the people who carry badges. But David Robinson isn't just relying on audio forensics. He pulled the cell phone data. He mapped the towers. And what he found made the geography of this case absolutely terrifying. Remember how I told you the driving pattern looked like a scribble? It was not random. When you overlay Daniel's final GPS pings onto a topographical map, you see a bizarre, almost deliberate pattern. He drives into the desert, loops around a specific cluster of brush, stops for exactly 7 minutes, then accelerates rapidly toward the ravine. 7 minutes. A vehicle idling in the middle of nowhere. What do you do for 7 minutes? You talk. You argue. You wait for someone. And here is the detail that broke something inside me when I first heard it. Just 3 miles from the ravine where the Jeep was found, in that same desolate stretch of Arizona scrubland, another set of human remains had been discovered 3 months earlier. A different person, a different car. Similar circumstances. The police dismissed it immediately. No connection, they said. Just a tragic coincidence in a dangerous desert. But David Robinson started digging into that other case, and the similarities were sickening. The vehicle was found abandoned, crashed, in rough terrain just off a service road. The driver was missing. No footprints. No logical flight path. The remains of that person were eventually located by a hiker weeks later, miles away, in a location that made no sense for someone on foot. The official cause of death was listed as exposure to the elements. Case closed. Again. 2 vanished drivers, 2 wrecked cars, a 3-mile radius, and an agency that seemed allergic to connecting dots. David Robinson began to ask a question that nobody in authority wanted to answer. Is there a pattern of disappearances along this specific corridor? And if so, is the desert really what's killing these men? Or is the desert just a convenient burial ground for something far more deliberate? He hired private investigators. He brought in independent cadaver dogs, the kind that can detect the scent of human remains from years ago. Those dogs hit on multiple locations near the crash site. They sat down, looked at their handlers, and signaled a definitive positive. The sheriff's office said the dogs were wrong, that the scents were animal remains or contaminated evidence. But David had a cadaver dog handler with 20 years of military experience telling him otherwise. She said those dogs don't lie. Somebody died near that ravine, and somebody was moved. The implication was clear. Daniel might have been there, incapacitated, possibly even alive when the deputy arrived, but by the time the real search grid got established, he was no longer anywhere near the Jeep. So where did he go? David developed a theory that chills me to my core. He believes his son encountered someone out in that desert, someone who took advantage of his confused mental state, someone who knows those back roads like the veins on their own hand. He believes the crash was not the end of the story, but a midpoint, a transfer. He believes that voice on the Bodycam was not a ghost, but a hostage trying to be found. The official narrative remains unchanged. The Buckeye Police Department insists they did a thorough search. that Daniel Robinson walked off into the desert and succumbed to the elements, that the voice was an auditory mirage, that the seat position is just an anomaly. They closed the investigation. Not solved, just closed. Daniel Robinson remains a missing person, but the file is collecting dust. David Robinson, however, has never stopped. He has logged thousands of miles on his own truck, organized volunteer search parties that have scoured areas the police never touched, and found the remains of at least 6 other missing people who were not his son. Let that sink in. A desperate father searching for his own child has uncovered enough skeletal remains to solve 6 other families' mysteries, while the official investigation sits in a drawer. He has brought more closure to strangers than the system has brought to him. The ending here is not an answer. It's a question that should keep you up at night. How does a 6'2" geologist vanish from a crash site while a deputy is standing right there? How does a seat move itself into a position impossible for the owner to drive in? And what was happening during those 7 minutes of idling in the pitch-black desert before the Jeep launched into that ravine? David Robinson still answers his phone every time it rings, hoping for a tip, a miracle, a call from a hunter who stumbled upon a piece of clothing or a fragment of bone. He still believes his son is out there, maybe alive, held somewhere. Maybe not, but he refuses to let the world forget Daniel's name. If this story made you angry, good, it should. Share this video with someone who has never heard the name Daniel Robinson. Put it on your timeline. Send it to a true crime group. Do whatever you have to do. Because as long as we are talking about it, the case is not cold. David Robinson is still fighting, and the least we can do is make sure the algorithm doesn't bury his son's name the way the desert tried to. Hit that subscribe button right now. Ring the bell so you don't miss the next update, because I promise you, this story is not over. And if you have any information, any sighting, any rumor, no matter how small, the family has a tip line. I have linked it in the description. Let me know your theory in the comments. Do you think the voice was real? Do you think Daniel was taken? I read everything you write. Stay safe out there, and never, ever stop looking.